You know the thing about a saga? It is long, it is vast, and it is full of twists and turns. Like this video. Hello, my fam. It is Perez, the queen of all media, the original influencer, and your number one source for everything. It ends with us. Saga. This has been the busiest week on record for Jed Wallace. I've mentioned that name to you all many times over just the last few days. He is the Texan whom Team Baldoni hired as part of his crisis PR expert before the release of It Ends With Us. Repeatedly, Team Baldoni has asserted that all Jed Wallace did was monitor online chatter about everything. He could have done more. He's highly capable, but he didn't have to. All the negative feedback in the summer of 2024 that Plague Lively got was of her own doing. People made up their own minds based on information they received, articles, videos in her own words, and they shared their opinions. There was no astroturfing. That's a real fancy term that's fairly new. Astroturfing is the deceptive practice of hiding the sponsors of an orchestrated message or organization to make it appear as though it originates from and is supported by unsolicited grassroots participants. Meaning, making something look organic that's not organic. But Justin Baldoni and his crew assert that did not happen here. Lawyers for the advocate for women who is speaking up for victims, I'm sure, will argue, well, Jed Wallace's work was untraceable. They even promoted that to Justin Baldoni. It's untraceable. Well, guess what, babes? If something is untraceable, it means you can't prove it. Or maybe it didn't happen. So, Jed Wallace was a late addition to Litigious Lively's first amended complaint. He was not mentioned when she originally filed her lawsuit. And remember, Team No Receipts told Judge Lyman before filing their amended complaint that there would be at least one additional party. That happened to be Jed Wallace. And in what some might argue was a preemptive measure, Jed Wallace filed a lawsuit against her in Texas, where he lives and his company is based. So that means there is litigation between these two in both Texas and New York. The Van Zandt CEO filed a motion to be dismissed from the Texas litigation, but Jed Wallace just filed a response to that motion to dismiss, and it is, not to be rude, but most of the filings from Jed Wallace's lawyer have been pretty basic, boring, dry. Not this one. Oh my God, let me share with you the juiciest bits. Addressing the judge in Texas, Team Wallace says, quote, Lively peppers her introduction and summary with various insults and disparaging comments about Street, his company, and Wallace having little to do with the merits of her motion, accusing plaintiffs of judicial harassment and retribution in a far-reaching attempt to muzzle a woman for speaking out about sexual harassment. She laments being hauled into court some 2,000 miles from her home in New York, apparently overlooking that she did the very same thing to these Texans by adding them in the New York litigation, weeks after this case was filed and after she had already sued Wallace in Hayes County, Texas. Nothing but facts. Boom. Her New York lawsuit is against 10 defendants on 15 causes of action. Only 3 claims were against Street Wallace, but one intentional infliction of emotional distress remember that drama from earlier this week, has been withdrawn by Lively as noted by the court. Her motion leans heavily on the first to file rule, arguing that Lively's New York case, which initially did not include Street or Wallace, is first, even though she amended her complaint to add Street and Wallace several weeks after they sued her in this case. So in the simplest of terms, she's arguing the first to file rule, but actually Street, Wallace were the first to file. Get it straight. A little further along, in fact, hardly anything is said about Wallace and Street at all, who are first mentioned concerning when they were approached on August 7th, 2024, and began working with Baldoni's crisis PR experts. This was more than a year after the alleged bad behavior by Baldoni and others on the set of It Ends With Us film, which is the focus of her New York litigation. Street and Wallace were never on the set, had never met Lively, never sexually harassed her, never engaged in the purported creepy behavior, and were not parties to or involved in any contractual rider prohibiting sexual harassment. Their involvement was limited in duration, 3 months, and scope, assisting the agency group, Melissa Nathan, in social digital mitigation and remediation. What does that mean, though? Then, and this is probably the most damning allegation that Jed Wallace has against her, they remind the court in Texas that even prior to filing her lawsuit, she filed that CRD complaint in California, where in that complaint, the expert extortionist accused Jed Wallace of sexual harassment. How? He didn't. So he has a very strong defamation case against her. They also tell the judge that Lively's factual background is dog poo. Lively's lengthy factual background is almost all about her, making sure we know that Miss Lively is an actress and entrepreneur who had, she says, troubles with Justin Baldoni, the movie studio owned by him, his billionaire business partner, the sexual harassment and misconduct that occurred on the set of the film by Baldoni and Wayfarer CEO Jamie Heath, including Baldoni's allegedly creepy behavior, which Lively describes in great detail. They state that all of the claims against Wallace in the CRD complaint are untrue. Lively describes the New York litigation, which she initiated against 8 defendants, but omits that the suit she initiated was not against Street or Wallace. They also address Lively trying to serve Wallace after filing her lawsuit in Texas, saying it is absolutely untrue, as Lively alleges, that Wallace continually refused to accept service. Although again, even if true, we demur. French for so what? They also argue that the Texas court has jurisdiction over Lively because she requested affirmative relief in Texas, and therefore this case should move forward. I agree, it should move forward. Taylor Swift's former bestie might disagree, but I demur. I'm gonna have to start using that from now on. All right, my friend, that is the very latest. This just broke moments ago, and I had to bring it to you because I am Perez, the queen of all media, the original influencer, and your #1 source for everything It Ends With Us saga. So, do you think this judge should allow Jed Wallace to move forward with his Texas lawsuit? Let me know your answer, and let's discuss everything in the comment section.